We have half an hour. We're going to talk about extending ArcGIS Hub. So what is Hub? Well, if you were just here, Graham did a great job of explaining what it is. Really, it's a two-way engagement platform that's built on top of the rest of the platform. What's cool about it is there's two versions. There's the basic and there's the premium, which means everybody gets the basic one, which allows you to create your own initiatives, create sites, et cetera, et cetera. So you, basically, if you've ever used open data, that's now transitioned itself into being the Hub basic version. So you're creating sites, managing teams, that sort of stuff. So what we wanted to talk about is really review some various capabilities that as a developer, you have to work with what's going on with this Hub environment. So the first thing we wanted to mention is we have an open source project called hub.js. You can see it's like at Esri, and then there's a whole bunch of different packages that you would install, and you can work with this. And essentially, this stuff is extending the ArcGIS REST.js set of packages, which either you can wait until April when these talks will be up on YouTube, or use a time machine and go back to yesterday. We gave 2 talks on this that were in a row. But the hub.js extension on top of this really allows you to work with events, annotations, and, Mike? Initiatives. And so this is Mike, and he's right here. That's one of it. Now Mike is going to show us a little simple application that's working with initiatives. Do you want to stand or?
There.
Okay. All right. We'll just, right. Do a little bit of this.
5, please.
5.
Hi, I'm Mike. I work with Dave. And until yesterday, I knew very little about hub.js. But I was doing this talk, so I thought I should learn a little something about it. And so last night at the bar, I whipped up this Ember app just to sort of try to understand what this thing can do. And then conveniently, I can use it to show you just a couple of things that it can do for you. So the code is on GitHub. That's pretty small. mjuniper/hub-4-devs. It doesn't do a whole lot, but you're welcome to the code. To show you the code, I'm going to use my new favorite toy, Code Sandbox. Is anybody using that? It's super awesome. Maybe I was the last to know, but I only really kind of started messing with this in the last couple of days. I pushed my app to GitHub and then pointed Code Sandbox at it, and I get it showing up in this nice IDE. But not only that, like Ember CLI, the Ember's JavaScript framework CLI is running a development server up in the cloud. And the app that I just showed you is running from Code Sandbox. Unfortunately, you can't make the URL bar bigger in Chrome, but that is the app running right from Code Sandbox. So it doesn't do a ton. You can search for initiatives, get a results list. You can paginate the results, and then you can economic development. What's that called? Grow your local. I whipped this up in a hurry, so it's very possible it will break if I hit the wrong initiative. So here's my list of initiatives. I click one, and I can get some details about it, including the banner image that they uploaded when they created this. So how does that work? In order to tell you how it works, I'm going to give you just a very quick 1,000-foot view of Ember. One of the main ideas of Ember is a router, and the router maps URLs to routes. Like URLs like, for instance, slash initiatives with a query string. That's the initiatives route, and then the details route is /initiatives/ID. The router maps those URLs to routes, and then in Ember, the route is responsible for fetching the appropriate data and passing it on to the controller, and the controller then makes it available to the template for display. One other important idea of Ember that I have to tell you about in order for this to make any sense at all is a service. A service is an Ember object that lives, it's singleton, it lives for the life of the application, and it's a good place to do things that require persistent state or maybe data fetching, which is what I'm going to use it for. And so, important ideas there are routes that get the data and services that are good for actually doing that data fetching. So I've got this. This is the initiatives index route. That's this page, the search results. There's a bunch of Ember ceremony up here injecting the service so that it's available in here, and then some query params, but the important stuff is down here. I construct just some options that I know are going to work because I consulted the docs that Dave showed you briefly with hub.js and pass it on to my service. This.hub initiatives, that's my service, and I just call a method on it, search initiative, and pass that stuff through. Similarly, on the initiative details route, that's this page. I do something very similar in the model hook. I think I maybe glossed over that. This is the model hook. By implementing the model function on your Ember route, that's how you make it available, make your data available to the controller. Whatever you return from this becomes the model on this corresponding controller. And so here I do something very similar. This.hub initiatives, my service, .get initiative, and I just pass it the ID of the initiative I'm interested in. Okay, this is really the important part. This is my service. I npm installed the Esri /hub initiatives module. That's hub.js, part of hub.js. And then up here at the top, I just import search initiatives and get initiatives, just two functions from that module. And then my service is super simple. Search initiatives method on my service just delegates to this hub.js method, search initiatives. And then similarly for my get initiative service method, it just delegates to the hub initiatives module get initiative function. And that's all there is to it. This doesn't do a whole lot, but you could take this idea much farther and do a whole bunch of initiative-y stuff and other things that hub.js can do.
Okay, so Mike just showed you this really quick app that he whipped up, and he happened to do it using Ember. You can do this using Dojo. You could do it using jQuery, React, Angular. It really doesn't matter. These libraries, the hub.js library and its underpinnings, the ArcGIS REST.js libraries, those are vanilla JavaScript. You can use them anywhere. You can run them in Node if you want. So all of that stuff is just built in a way that it can be used anywhere. And I would note that those methods and functions are exactly the same code that is running in our production environment. This is not some shadow copy or anything. So that is exactly how our software works. So if we change, like you can also use this to create initiatives and script the creation of them. If we were to change how that worked in the actual hub product, the next time you did an npm install or updated your package, you would get those changes. So that's, I think, a good thing, right? We're doing it in a way that everybody can stay in sync. We also have hub.py. So yeah, this is a thing. It's for hub automation, just like the rest of our Python APIs. It has significant white space, which is not really my thing. I'm more an or curly brackets and semicolons person. But essentially, this will be kept up to date more or less with the same set of functions. And it's just to enhance your ability to automate the platform using Python. Obviously, the Python code is not the code that we are running in production. So we have Manushi, who's on our team. She'll be keeping these two things in sync. So there's a small Python library at this point. I believe we can create initiatives and search for them, and we can assign indicators into those initiatives. We also have some web components that John Guavar, who's back over here, he's been working on this little sub-project. So the idea here is that you'll be able to take various small aspects of the hub ecosystem and embed that into your existing WordPress site, et cetera, et cetera. So right now we have a pretty nifty button. It's a follow button that allows users to follow an initiative. I believe it also does the entire dance about saying, oh, hey, if you need to follow something, that means you need to create an account. It's going to show that whole user interface and flow and kick off an OAuth session as well as account creation. So very small on the screen, but it packs in a whole bunch of information. And being a web component, you drop a script tag at the top and you use some angle brackets in your WordPress or whatever other site you want to do. And I believe that we have a bunch more components that are going to be coming. If you're really interested, this is built using Stencil. Stencil.js is the underpinnings of that. So then let's get into talking about extending Hub, right? Because this is a developer conference, and we wanted to say, hey, Hub developer, how can you be happy? And so let's talk about that model. With a lot of other things inside the Esri platform and ecosystem, your extensibility model is to go write a bit of code and then deploy that inside of the runtime environment. So for the Web AppBuilder, you're building widgets. For Pro, you build add-ins. The unit of extensibility for the hub is the app. Okay, you're going to be able to create your own app. It doesn't matter where you host it. That thing is something that is going to be enabled as part of a solution. And so my understanding from having watched Graham in here just recently, I was going to shift to showing a demo live, but it sounds like the Wi-Fi is iffy at best. So what I'll do is I'm going to run through a whole stack of slides showing roughly the demo. And then if the Wi-Fi is stable and at the end we can go and poke at a few of these things live. I've got some tabs open in Chrome, but I don't want to try to do this and have it take forever loading. So how this would work, when you log in, you can go to the initiative gallery and we can look around and say, okay, this is all the initiatives that are available. Right now it's filtered from Esri. We can go and say, oh, let's list the ones from my organization. Now I created this one right here. So I'm showing the flow that like how a customer would end up using your solution. So I've created this initiative. I'm going to go ahead and activate it by pressing this button up here, give it a name. And it goes through this process of creating things. It's an initiative, so it automatically gets a website. And then once that's done, this is now an instance of an initiative. And this card right here, if we scroll up a little bit, this is a solution template card. And there's a couple things I wanted to call out. A, it's got this little area up here. This is saying 0 of some number. This is indicating that this particular solution requires some amount of data. We call those things indicators. And this is basically how you're going to take your application that you create and map it into your customer's data, or allow your customer to map their data onto the requirements of your application. So in this case, that's what we'll do. We press this add data button. That pops up this indicator UI. We say select data. In this case, we need some bike lanes. And we click on that. We're going to hit select here. And now it says, hey, one of these indicators are now there, and we're good to go. We can actually configure the application. Now, what's going to happen in this configuration? Right now, there's a JSON template behind the scenes, and it's just a template. We're actually going to take that template. We're going to take the initiative or the indicator information, which in that case was just a layer. We're going to interpolate it into that JSON, and we're going to create a new item in ArcGIS Online. And so that kind of runs here for a few seconds, cooks it up. Now this is an instance. This card is pointing at the instance of that particular application. You can see it's green. It says it's configured, and we can press, and we can share it. So we go ahead and there's this little share with the public guy. Cool. And then we actually follow the link. And this is not a very exciting application at all. All it is just a map. The blue lines are the bike lanes. And way up here in this really small text is something that was interpolated into it, a piece of information from the organization, so that when it's being generated, we can inject information into the template. So this is its idea about the extensibility model. You build an app and your application needs to consume items in online, but not just like the services. It's going to get its own configuration. That crosswalk between that bike lanes app needed to know where the customer's bike lanes data was. That crosswalk is going to come out of the JSON of the solution item that gets laid down. So some information about how to do this. There's a repo called Esri Hub Ready Apps that's got a whole bunch of markdown documents that talk about this model. In general, we can also point you to the configurable app section of just the ArcGIS Online help. You don't necessarily have to follow this to a T, but just it's conceptually the idea. You build an app. When the app boots, it needs to load an item and get its configuration out of the item, and that's what it's going to. That's how it's going to figure out what layers to talk to and what field mappings are there. So from that, let's talk about how this happens from the templating side. So when an initiative gets created, we have this initiative manager UI, and we can change over to viewing templates. And once we change this filter to doing templates, we can create new templates. And this is, how you can customize things inside your organization. So we've already created this one template here called the Dev Summit 2019 canned. And these are the sharing controls and deleting and stuff like that. If we go into it, this UI looks very similar to the instance of the initiative, but this is the template of it. And that's indicated by this little template tag up here. And a couple other things in here. Add content to your initiative template. Right now, we have this guy right here. And if we scroll down, we can see it looks very similar, but it's showing us a slightly different UI in terms of those indicators. As we configure this further, we would actually add more indicators to it, and these numbers will change. And then again, you can edit the template and edit the details. Now, this is where, as a developer, right, we're starting to give you a lot more control. This is where you actually edit the JSON template that will be used, and this is what is used to create the item that gets laid down, that your app's going to talk to. So this is kind of one step removed from your application. And on this next slide, we have this area over here. It's called indicators. There's a couple of sets of built-in indicators. And the one I wanted to highlight here is there's information about the organization that owns this. So what I wanted to do was be able to say that application in the upper right, what was visible up there was the org name. I wanted to customize that, right? I don't want it just to be Dave Bowman's super spiffy app. I want it to be Washington, D.C.'s super spiffy bike lane app or something. So under org, we open that up. There's a name section right here. And then in this JSON, I can go and just put my cursor over here and click on any of these, and it will inject it. And what you'll see is it's got the double curly syntax. So if you're familiar with most web templating languages, handlebars, underscore templates, etc., this is going to be interpolated. So all of the things that are part of the indicators, whether they're an indicator saying I need a custom bike lane, layer, or whatever you want to configure in this thing, you can then interpolate it in here. And this is the output of this is an item that would actually have the org name put there, and this one above it is the actual bike lane's URL. So this is how we're allowing the system to configure stuff on the fly. And then, here's the output, and there's the org name up there at the top. So this is a super simplistic example, right? We've only picked a single layer and just connected it in there. This is another example of a much more comprehensive app. This is an economic development app. It's got access to 25 or 30 different layers in there that can be configured. The organization can have their own data, or it can be backed by Living Atlas. We have a 2D view and a 3D view, et cetera, et cetera. If we look at it in this environment, we can see that there are this huge list of indicators that have been set up. And inside of this, you can see a whole bunch of the curly brackets. The point here is that if you follow that pattern of saying your application will go ahead and fetch an item and get its configuration out of that, pretty much the sky's the limit in terms of what other information you can interpolate into this environment and then customize the app. You can have it pick up like the organization's theme, the theme's logo colors, and make a very customized experience. So that's kind of the screenshotted run through of this. We'll just kind of go through it and wrap it up, and then I'll jump back into a browser and we'll kind of just poke at it as long as the Wi-Fi holds up. If this seemed interesting to you, there's another session. There was a session right before this that Graham was talking at, and then right after this, or at 2:30, Graham and myself are giving another session, and this is in the Mojave Learning Center, deep customization of hub sites and enterprise sites. And then there is the longer version of this. Normally, they try and orchestrate these things such that the full hour session happens first, and then there's a demo theater. But I guess they're assuming there were time machines because we had to do this before at 4 p.m. John and Tom. It's the John and Tom show. You might have noticed that consistency in these bar pictures when we were putting this together last night. So that's basically the talk that we've got. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to attempt to exit PowerPoint and shift to a browser and see. Oh, that's the next talk I'm doing. In case you want to go see Angry Man with Banana. Dismissal. Give me a second here. Put that one away. Put this one away. Slide around. Slide around. Okay. So let's see what's going to happen here. Let's go into this view of it. So apologies for well, actually you can probably read it. It's just really hard to navigate here. So this is this environment. You can edit the template, the item side of it, but what we're really interested is in template side. And if I was to select this, just to give you an idea how this templating works, for some reason I wanted to go put the initiative name in here. This is, this editor is fairly interactive. You can just replace things. If we wanted to fold this up, go into the bike lanes and say, okay, cool. I want to add an additional field to this. Right now, this is just the bike lanes indicator, and it just says I need a layer. It can be polyline or polygon. But I can also say, hey, I want to do some field mapping. So I can do crash type, right? And say that that's a text field, and go ahead and add another one, and crash date. And say this is now a date or time. And go ahead and save that up. And if I now go back to the initiative template editor, we should now see that this thing, it still says one optional, but if I was to configure it further and actually bring it up in the instance, it would now say, oh, you've got to give me a layer and you need to tell me these two fields in that layer. So that's how you actually can do the deeper mapping between the schema that your application requires and the schema your customer's data is in. So just to look at that econ dev, what its template looks like, to kind of give you like the first example was super simplistic, and this is the total other end of the spectrum. So this thing is going to create a web mapping app. It's also going to create a web map that is backed on that. The two of them are connected together, and we can scroll down and kind of look in here, and you can see so many of these like colon stuff. It's also optional. And so there's an entire templating language. There's a library called AdLib that we're using that's open source that we put out there. But, there's a motel and hotel layer, and this thing needs some sort of a layer, and then it needs these three fields. So this is, the level of customization that you can kind of put into these templates, and your app runs off of that, runs on top of the platform, and that's how that works. Does anybody have any questions? It was great. It was overwhelming. Does this seem reasonable? I mean, at this point, we're using it for our own stuff. Does it seem like the sort of thing people can be like, oh yeah, we can figure this out? We are going to be, this will be on YouTube, and we'll be building docs and things. Might be useful. Yep.
So you've got the required indicators and you've got the optional indicators. What happens if you don't add the optional ones that you've templated? Are they just empty?
Okay, so this is a really good question. So there's two different types of indicators. Some are optional and some are required. What happens if you don't put the optional ones in? And conveniently, that's actually indicated right here. So this goes into this templating syntax where it says, hey, this one is optional, and The last parameter of this says, basically instructs the templating system that if this zoning incentive field's URL name property is null or undefined, then what the templater does is it's going to go up 4 levels of JSON nesting and just delete that node. So it's a way that your app has to be able to work without things, but that's what happens in here. Because otherwise you'd have like a structure and it can be like, oh, this is the thing I want to use, but I've got curly brackets, I don't know what to do with it, and fall over. So the actual templater will extract things out. So that, this is again a very, very custom app that our partner Blue Raster built. So, yes. Okay. Right. So the question, because this is being recorded, the question is basically, what is the relationship between Hub and online, and particularly in respect to a partner and the partner's accounts and marketplace? So in half an hour, the deep customization of sites and stuff, we'll probably talk a lot more about that in there. I would also recommend coming to the island or talking with Andrew Turner, who's at the back, who can probably speak to the whole partner situation in terms of how those things come together. But the really quick way I would say it is the Hub brings some tech to the table that's just like every other piece of things in the platform, right? We have sites and pages and initiatives. The Hub is helping orchestrate all of that stuff as well as the rest of the platform through a different user interface with, hopefully very quickly, click, 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 boom. You created a website that has a story map embedded in it. It created 3 web maps for you and a survey and another application that will show the results of the survey as the data is collected. And you did that through a few clicks as opposed to going and figuring out how to do a survey and going and figuring out how to build a web map and pull those things together. So it's really kind of an orchestration layer. And then there's the collaboration model that goes with it with this there's a community org that's connected. But I think that the session on deep customization of the Hub would be good. I think Graham's probably going to go over that again. And again, coming over to the island and talking to the people there would probably help more on that aspect of it. Any other questions? Cool. Well, we'll be doing a lot more of this stuff. I mean, we literally enabled this last Tuesday morning, so it's very fresh. The docs will be catching up as usual, and hopefully we're excited to see what people start doing with this. Thank you very much.